What is up, ladies and gentlemen? We are finally back with another episode of the Sweet Tea Show here on the Sportsbox Network. Unfortunately, real life got in the way for a few weeks. Garth was overworked at work, and I am back in college. So, as you can see, good old generic dorm room in the background. But anyway, we are back. We have a lot to talk about. I'm going to talk about the national championship game, obviously. Got a lot of recruiting stuff we're going to talk about as well. Before we get into it, if you guys are new here, as always, I'm Noah Dog Diabird, joined by my co-host and good buddy, Gar Charger Patrick. And at the bottom, handsome sir, could you please introduce yourself for our viewers tonight?
Hi, I am Derek Diebler. I am Noah's uncle and a huge college football fan.
That about sums it up. He's also a doctor. He teaches what is it, anatomy, microbiology, I think it was.
Oh, anatomy, microbiology, physiology, pharmacology, all types of cool stuff.
All types of cool stuff. But the most cool thing, like he said, he is a Georgia Bulldogs fan. Garth is outnumbered on the show once again. We have to outnumber the Florida Gators fan. But anyway, before we get into it, just one thing we have to say before we get into college football talk and whatnot. We did do our picks competition once again this year. Garth won it last year. And, well, unfortunately, I lost again. I'm now 0-2, which means I have to do a punishment. Last year, I had to do an essay, a 5-paragraph essay on why I thought Billy Napier could succeed at Florida. It was the most disappointing assignment I've ever had in my life, and I've written like 20-page papers before, so that was not a lot of fun. But, yep, Garth, go ahead and start brainstorming on what you want me to do for whenever our next show is as a punishment. Already got a comment coming in from our good buddy Tom Scavetta saying, let's get fired up. Great to see you, Derek.
Hey, Noah, speaking of fired up real quick, I did tell you I had an appearance real quick for tonight. And
yeah, go ahead.
It was not a person or a special guest.
Oh, is that your fantasy football trophy?
Fantasy football championship trophy, which I believe, did you on third or fourth place? But either way, me and Noah taking 2 spots in the top 4 was pretty cool.
Yeah, I think I was fourth, but Garth did avenge me. He beat the team that beat me, so there you go. Got a little cash prize as well. Congratulations to him. Our good buddy Mickey Bradley saying the Florida Gators are not finished. Incorrect. They are absolutely finished. Back-to-back losing seasons. But before we get into the Georgia talk, obviously, because that'll be the main focus of the show, something broke literally only about 40 minutes before we went live here.
We have breaking news here on the Sports Box.
Big news just about an hour ago. Kamani McLean, who is the #1 cornerback recruit for the 2023 class, had originally committed to Miami, just announced about an hour ago he has decommitted from them to commit to the University of Colorado. Obviously, University of Colorado recently brought in Deion Sanders as their new head coach. And this is a big moment for them, guys, because, they got in Travis Hunter, the recruit from Jackson State. He was the #1 cornerback prospect last year. So now they have 2 back-to-back #1 ranked cornerback prospects. Garth, I'll start with you on this one because, we mentioned, Deion Sanders on the show a few weeks back. Definitely an interesting job opportunity, Power 5 school, but a lower talented Power 5 school. But already get some, solid recruits, some solid transfers in there, multiple 5-star players. What were your thoughts when you saw this news?
Yeah, I won't lie. I was expecting it because, the whole recruitment process for Kamani McLean was one of those ones, it seems like every cycle we have one kid that's like this where it's kind of all over the place. Every few weeks or every, other month they're flipping schools. You have no idea where they're actually going to end up. But, there was a lot of things that kind of leading up to this, to me personally, that made it seem like he was going to choose them. He didn't show up to his letter of intent signing day at school. He literally just was supposed to. They set it up for him. He just never showed up. He was supposed to have met with the coaching staff just a couple of weeks ago for Miami in Tampa Bay area. And actually ended up totally ghosting and skipping out on them to go to Colorado and take an official visit with Deion. And then he posted the photos and stuff to his story about that visit, whereas he had no photos whatsoever of any of the other schools that he took visits to. So I think he kind of told us without telling us that it was going to end up being Colorado. And I will say obviously as a Florida Gator fan, but more importantly, as somebody who does not root in any shape or form for the Miami Hurricanes, I am glad that he did end up going to Colorado. And then lastly, I will say, guys, Deion Sanders, like me and Noah predicted, is going to be able to recruit. I pulled it up here real quick already. Per 247, 19th overall class in the nation. The composite rank taking into effect on 3 ESPN rivals, stuff like that. They're back at 29th and 4th in the nation in the transfer portal ranking. So he, in the course of just a few weeks there at Colorado, guys, is off to a hot start in the recruiting department.
Yeah, he is. And, personally, I don't have a lot of love for Miami myself. I think their fans are obnoxious loudmouths when their team hasn't won anything in 21 years. But I'll throw this one to you, Uncle, because, I think more in general, like you can obviously talk about the specific prospect or whatnot. But in general, what are your thoughts on, Sanders to Miami? What do you, or excuse me, Colorado? What do you think he can do there? Because this is definitely, no disrespect, but for Power 5 teams, Colorado talent-wise is way down there. That said, they are in the Pac-12, which is a weaker conference, and obviously USC and UCLA will not even be there by, I think it's 2024. So, what's your outlook on, Deion at Colorado and what he's doing there?
I think Deion's an excellent salesman, and I think he's going to be a good recruiter. I don't know if it's going to be enough, at least not right away. Colorado is pretty much at the bottom of the Pac-12. But as you say, it's not one of the stronger conferences. So if he gets 2 or 3 good recruiting classes, by Pac-12 standards, he may make Colorado competitive. I don't think they're going to challenge Oregon or Utah or USC right away. He's probably going to be at least 2 or 3 years out of that, but you never know. It's so hard to tell as far as, he's a great motivator. He was a fantastic athlete in his day. He's definitely a wonderful salesman, how he's been able to get these good recruits. I think the verdict still out is he a good coach? Obviously, he had a lot of success at Jacksonville State, and that's awesome. But going up to a Power 5 FBS school, a whole different level of competition. And I think that's where the rubber is going to meet the road, if you will. He may do great, and I hope he does, because I like him. But I think it's going to take him at least 2 or 3 years of solid recruiting classes before they're truly going to be competitive, even in the Pac-12.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely a big step going up from an FCS team, which, by the way, I think he lost both his bowl games at Jackson State. So it wasn't exactly like he was, lighting up winning championships or anything. But, yeah, I've always said, I think it's a good starting point for him in the FBS. It is still a Power 5 school, granted, lower rung. He's got the, plenty of patience, very long leash to, kind of build what he wants to do there. And, clearly, like you said, he has a knack for getting these recruits in there. He has a way of relating to these young men, I think it is, because obviously, very esteemed, not just, college football player, NFL Hall of Famer, stuff like that. He knows what makes these young men tick because he was there a long time ago, and we remember he was quite the character. Definitely not an orthodox athlete, to say the least. So, yeah, I do like him. I hope he does.
Not promoting himself, so.
Yeah, definitely.
Hey,
oh, go ahead.
No, before I didn't know, I didn't want to miss this before we wrapped up this subject is all. I was looking at it here, 23 transfer portal grabs for Deion Sanders here. And, when you first look at that, you probably go, well, yeah, he probably brought, everybody and their brother over from Jackson State. But when you actually look at it, he's got guys coming in from Ole Miss, Arkansas, Michigan, Kentucky, another guy from Arkansas, my Florida Gators, Indiana State, Fresno State, Louisville, USF, Kent State, Clemson, West Virginia. So he's getting players from other, either middle of the pack type programs or even some of the better programs there in teams like Clemson.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. You have definitely a wide variety of teams you listed off there, and like you said, big teams like Clemson. He's getting a decent amount of guys in. I mean, I bet it wasn't easy for him to get McLean to decommit from Miami because I mean, God knows how much money they're freaking flinging out with NIL this year to get that top 5 class they got. Mikey saying main focus is Georgia. I can't do this. Well, I'm sorry, Mikey. I know you're a Gators fan and you're upset, but we got a lot to talk about in that game in a second. Our good buddy Josh Burdick saying, "Woo!" I know he wasn't saying that during most of Notre Dame's season, but no, he's a great guy. That's huge. The Sanders effect is in full swing. Definitely agree with that. Screw Cormani. We want to hear Maliki Nelson news. Well, Malachi Nelson,
Malachi,
whose name I have never butchered on this show, is a quarterback recruit for the University of Southern California. So we'll see what he does next year. Tim Brewster is also amazing for Sanders, too. He's someone everyone seems to love. Also, to me, Sanders is going to be a recruiter and a player coach, whereas his coordinators will be doing the X's and O's. It's smart of him, in my opinion, to do so. Definitely think that's a fair assessment. We know he won't be touching Tyler Buchner of Notre Dame, who was not very good in their bowl game against South Carolina. But enough about those bums, because we're going to talk about, you know what, Garth, I do just want to apologize, not just to you, but the audience, because the past 12 months I've been making a critical mistake. As you know, whenever I've been discussing the Georgia Bulldogs, I refer to them as the defending champions. But now, unfortunately, that's highly outdated because they are no longer the defending champions, Garth. They are the 2-time reigning defending champions. I got to do my little Bruce Buffer impression there. But yeah, this was not really a football game, honestly. I mean, obviously, as a Georgia sports fan, I was like, you know what? I know it's 52-7, but you never know, man. You never know with Georgia sports. But I gotta say, I have very high expectations. I'm very critical of this team. Even I wasn't expecting this in my wildest dreams. I thought if they played an A-plus game, came out firing all cylinders, I thought they could maybe win by 2-3 possessions, maybe something like a 42-28 type of game was what I was kind of expecting. I wasn't expecting this. I mean, oh my God, it was from start to finish. They only made one major mistake the entire game, which is on that drive TCU actually scored. TCU had a 50-yard pass play to Darius Davis, but it wasn't like TCU drew up some incredible play. There was a massive miscommunication in the UJ secondary and a blown coverage that let them continue that drive. And obviously Max Duggan ran it in from 1 yard out. But from start to finish, I mean, UJ was just firing all cylinders. Their offense was clicking. It seemed like every play they were running, they were getting 9-10 yards off the pop. Didn't matter if they were passing. Didn't matter if they were running. Kenny McIntosh was phenomenal. Kendall Milton was great as well. I mean, even Branson Robinson, coming in the fourth quarter, the game's already decided, he's still ripping off runs. I think he had at least one touchdown, maybe even two. He was killing it in the fourth quarter. But definitely, I think the biggest star offensively, got to tip my cap to Stetson Bennett. 6 touchdown passes in a final college game on the biggest stage possible. Back-to-back champion, obviously. And, key stat here, 4 college football playoff games for him. He's the MVP in all 4 of them, which is just absolutely incredible. Obviously, the only player to ever do that. But on the other side for TCU, they just looked off all night. Max Duggan, and this was one of the keys to the game. I talked to you, Garth, on good old Nick D's show. To beat TCU's offense, you need to, put pressure on Max Duggan, maintain it or control his mobility. And, I got to say, other than maybe that 1 yard touchdown run, Duggan's mobility was not a factor in this game at all. So I'll throw this one to you, Garth. What were your main takeaways from this, quite frankly, just absolute beatdown that UGA put on TCU last Monday?
Yeah, so I believe I said it here on the show, but definitely on the show there with Nick D as well, Tricks and Picks. I had Georgia winning this game. I just thought that they were the much better team top to bottom. I said going into playoffs, realistically, I thought Georgia would repeat unless they had a game where they beat themselves, meaning, that they had some bad turnovers, had a lot of penalties, just played uncharacteristic football. But to absolutely demolish TCU in the fashion that they did, like you said, start to finish, it wasn't like it was a close game and then, late in the second half, they just pulled away. It was a blowout from the very first whistle. One thing that I noticed on the side of TCU, because honestly, Georgia was able to do just about what they wanted to do, just like you said, run the football, throw the football, even Stetson getting out of the pocket. I felt like, and I said this during the game too, TCU was trying too much of West and East type of football, screen plays to the flat, short, 5-yard out routes. And I've said this since last year, Georgia is a team that is absolutely absurd when it comes to covering sideline to sideline. When you have linebackers that are as fast as defensive backs, it's really hard to beat them running offensive plays like that, because even when the guy looks open, all of a sudden somebody's there to wrap him up and make what could have been a big play into a short gain. They didn't take enough vertical shots, but also, like you said, Duggan wasn't able to get out of the pocket, create plays with his legs, and the pressure was there. So it wasn't like he was having forever to sit back there and, try and take deep shots and scan the field. They did a really good job of containing and limiting him. And I think that really was the one way that TCU might have had a chance in the game, is if Max Duggan could really get going and have a big performance. And he didn't. And, just huge props to Georgia, guys. Congratulations on another national championship. You guys absolutely pounded them. I think the national championship was really the week before when you guys played Ohio State. But nonetheless, congrats, guys. I'm not happy that you guys won again, but I'm happy that you guys got to see your team win as one fan to another.
Well, thank you for that. And, I'll throw it to you, Uncle, because, man, what a result. I mean, I think like Garth says there, I don't ever want to disrespect TCU. I mean, they beat Michigan, who I think is a very good football team, who obviously demolished Ohio State, who gave us a run for our money. But, I think it's definitely a fair claim. It looks like that Ohio State game, that absolute thrilling end, was kind of the de facto national championship game because, from start to finish, I mean, Brock Bowers went off. And what did we say, Garth, last week? What was the key to the Ohio State game? As soon as they started targeting Brock Bowers, the offense could not be stopped. And in this game, they kept him in the game plan from the very start. On the other side, Quentin Johnston, TCU star receiver, was a non-factor. They contained DeMercado because Kendry Miller was out. But, yeah, Uncle, I mean, what were your thoughts in this game? Because, like I said, from start to finish, I wasn't expecting this, but it was just like from the word go, the first snap, I mean, they were just on it. They were making every single tackle. There were no missed tackles. I mean, they just did quite literally everything right. And you don't really see that very often.
Yeah, Kirby Smart said before the game, when Holly Rowe asked him, he said, our main word is aggression. And he put his money where his mouth is.
Mm-hmm.
I was very surprised. I mean, I did feel that Georgia would win because I did feel, honestly, they were the more talented team. But honestly, I thought it was going to be one of these where they pull away maybe late third quarter, early fourth quarter, win by 14, 18 points, something like that. Right. I don't think anybody was expecting this UGA just to demolish TCU. And like you said, if it wasn't for that one blown coverage in the Georgia secondary, I don't think TCU would have scored at all. And, it was Georgia dominating at the line of scrimmage. Our defensive line completely overwhelming their offensive line. And vice versa, our O-line, when we were on offense, playing probably their best game in weeks. And just Stetson Bennett was on fire. Kenny McIntosh was on fire. I mean, other than the Oregon game at the beginning of the season, this was probably Georgia's most perfect game. And I was surprised because I actually thought it was going to be closer, at least in the first half. They had an objective and they completed it. And I'm very proud of them. And not to disrespect TCU, I think TCU is a very good football team. I think, Max Duggan is a very good football player. And they beat an undefeated Michigan team. They've got nothing to be ashamed of. But on that particular night, Georgia was obviously the better team. And it was really telling to me when in the fourth quarter, as you mentioned, they had Brandon Robinson in, a freshman, early in the fourth quarter. they had Carson Beck, the backup quarterback, playing. And despite having the backups in for pretty much the entire fourth quarter, they still kept getting touchdowns. And, it wasn't like Kirby was trying to run up the score. He's like, well, these are our backups. You're either going to stop them or you're not. So very pleased with the performance. Couldn't be happier for the team in general. And, they just kind of ended the year with a big exclamation point. So very proud of the Dogs.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's really not much more to add. I mean, all due respect, even when our second and third string were in, they were still kind of kicking TCU's shit in. I mean, pretty much. It was just and look, I will say this, considering how nerve-wracking last year's national championship game was and the Ohio State game was, it felt nice for once as a UJ fan just have a nice stress-free game where it's just great from start to finish. And I will say this, by the way, one last thing before we go to some comments and move on to the next topic. I saw a lot of people saying this was the worst championship game in history. I don't know about you guys. I loved it from start to finish. I thought it was phenomenal. I thought it was an incredible game, but
if you're a Georgia fan, it was an excellent game. If you're a TCU fan or Big 12 fan, probably not so much, to be honest, but it's all a matter of opinion.
Mikey Bradley saying, yawn. Well, Mikey, I got a nice stat for you. Did you know, and I haven't said this to Garth at all, but did you know that the University of Georgia has now officially surpassed the University of Florida in claimed national titles 4-3? It feels so bad for Florida fans. All their jokes they had about us, 1980, we have more titles. In the span of only, 12 months, both of those have gone out the window.
Now it's Notre Dame.
Now it's Notre Dame, who hasn't won since 1988. But, there you go. What round do you realistically see Kenny McIntosh going NFL draft? I think he could go in like the third or fourth round, kind of around where James Cook went. And I think whoever drafted him would be getting an absolute steal of a player at that rate. He's a very good all-around running back. Tricks and confusion, that's long gone, old boy. That's right. It's now out of line with Nick D. Speaking of Nick D, I'm glad you reminded me of that. Mr. Nick D, the Stetson Bennett hater, saying, oh, there's been more talented UGA quarterbacks than Stetson Bennett. I'm like, I don't care. I don't care that Matthew Stafford could throw the ball 90 yards falling backwards. I don't care that Aaron Murray's the all-time SEC, passing yards leader. I care that Stetson Bennett, when it mattered the most, when all the games were on the line, was at the tip top of his game. And, look, I'll hold my hands up here. I'm sure people, if they go back 2 years ago on the show, they'll see me saying on a clip saying, I don't like Stetson Bennett. He should never play a snap ever again for UGA. But I don't think anyone expected this. So Stetson, thank you. And I got to say, I
can actually tell you guys, not this most recent Florida Georgia game, but the one before that I was at with my dad. We were sitting next to some Georgia fans because we were like right on the line. And the guys we were sitting next to, even during that game, were saying that they didn't think that Stetson Bennett was the guy there at Georgia. So it goes to show you how quickly things can come full circle.
I was not a Bennett fan. Really was not convinced. I admired his tenacity. I admired his guts, but was not really convinced he could do it until the Michigan game last year. And then it's almost like he evolved into a different person. And between that and the fourth quarter of the national championship against Bama last year, he doesn't make it look pretty and he's inconsistent. But when the game is on the line, he rises to the occasion. So I will say, he's probably not the most naturally gifted quarterback Georgia's had, or even the most talented. That could go to Matthew Stafford, David Green, or even if you really want to go back far, Fran Tarkenton. But I will say he probably has the guts and the grit of, I put that his moxie up against anybody. When the game's on the in the fourth quarter, whether it's against Alabama or Ohio State, he plays at his best. And I think that's his feature.
I'm just going to go out and say it. Greatest UJ quarterback of all time. Maybe even arguably their greatest player ever. Now, I'd still probably give that to Herschel because, I mean, Herschel was just on another level. But, I think there can definitely be a case made for Stetson Bennett. And look, all that doubt he's had the past 3 years from, all fans and especially UJ fans, he probably, put that on his little bulletin board and said, okay, you know what, watch this. Because even the coaches had written him off, said he was never playing again. He was third string coming into 2021. And, well, here he is now. He's college football and UGA legend pretty much. So love it.
Yeah, I would
Yes.
say as far as accomplishments on the field, I agree 100%. As far as the best accomplishments, no Georgia quarterback obviously has won back-to-back national championships. No Georgia quarterback has been the MVP of 4 playoff games. So as far as accomplishment, I agree. Could I say that based just on natural ability and talent compared to, say, a Matthew Stafford or a Fran Tarkenton? That's debatable. That's up for debate. But I will agree with you as far as what he accomplished at the college level, by far and away, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to address the haters one last time for, saying he's just a 25-year-old playing against 18-year-olds on a super team. I don't know what rock you guys have lived under, but most national championship winning quarterbacks don't do it on mediocre teams. They typically do it on great teams. I mean, did you think that A.J. McCarron on Alabama was playing on a team full of 2-stars? Or that Bryce Young was throwing to, a bunch of nobody bum walk-on players that you never heard of? Come on now. Be better with these criticism,
How old was
guys.
Chris Winkie when he won the national
Yeah,
championship?
I was about to say he's not even the oldest quarterback to ever win it.
Yeah, Chris Winkie was 28.
Yep.
When he played State.
That's our good buddy Mike Aldridge's favorite guy.
I think Brandon Wheaton was 28 when he played for Oklahoma State, and they won the Big 12, I think, 10 years ago. So it's not like there's been older quarterbacks before. So,
yeah. Speaking of the man, the myth, the legend, Nick D saying I'm a hot topic. These subtle shots at me, not at all, Nick. Just a good old Stetson Bennett defense brigade. Mikey Bradley saying so. Based on comparable scores, Florida was a better matchup for UJ than TCU was. Would have resulted in L. These guys, man, they just try to cling for any little consolation they can because their team is such an embarrassment now. I have told you that stat. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Just want to remind you. Getting shit tonight, least you could do is pick a team. Stetson just has that it factor, and it's not coachable, and it's certainly admirable. I agree. I completely agree. I mean, just think the one we let get away, Justin Fields at Ohio State, won 0 titles, and he was on a super team, by the way, in case people want to criticize Stetson for that.
Honestly, guys, what it reminds me of, to compare it to a different player in a different sport, is something like a Jimmer Fredette in basketball, where he's not the most naturally gifted. He's not the most talented guy, but he just shows up and he puts up numbers and he draws attention.
Yeah, absolutely. But enough about UJ. We will have plenty of time in future shows to discuss the 2-time defending national champions. But now we'll move on to our next topic, which is about another very solid team that has now made the college football playoff back-to-back years. Unfortunately, disappointment losing to TCU in the year before. They got boat raced, shall I say, by the Georgia Bulldogs. The Michigan Wolverines. This was a shocker to me, but this is absolutely massive news, I think. Blake Corum announcing he will return to the Wolverines for his senior season. Definitely not what I was expecting, because in my opinion, I think Blake Corum could declare for the draft tomorrow, and he'd be a lock first-round pick, probably even upper first half of the first round type of pick. Definitely, I think the best running back in college football currently. I think the only one you could say you could maybe make a debate for is Robinson at Texas, but I'd still probably give the edge, at least as a pure runner, to Blake Corum. That guy's just an absolute bruiser. But definitely wasn't expecting this one. I'll start with you on this one, Uncle, because, Michigan, very solid team. Making the college football playoff back-to-back years. Jim Harbaugh's kind of got that monkey off his back. The Ohio State monkey beat him back-to-back years, and this year wasn't even really close, quite frankly. There's, reports coming out that 5-star OSU quarterback Raiola, who decommitted, is visiting Michigan right now, which could be a big get for them. But, where are you at with Michigan? Because, they have made the CFP 2 straight years. Granted, they've lost both times. but they're kind of establishing themselves as, they're right there with Ohio State. It seems like, it's no longer in the past few years where the Big Ten was just like, it's Ohio State and everyone else. Now you look at it in Michigan, they look like I don't want to say favorites because you can never really count on Ohio State, but I mean, results are there. They beat them 2 back-to-back years. They won the conference back-to-back years. Where are you at for, the future of Michigan in the coming years in that Big Ten conference and playoff contention?
That's a good question with Michigan. I think they're a very talented program. I think Jim Harbaugh's done a good job getting quality players and to believe and buy into his system. Obviously, they've won the Big Ten back-to-back seasons. They've beaten Ohio State back-to-back seasons and, quite frankly, embarrassed Ohio State, in Columbus this year. I think Blake Corum coming back is huge for them. Blake Corum's probably going to be a Heisman candidate, and he should be. He may not win it because it's almost always a quarterback award, but I think he should get it. He'll probably earn at least an invite to New York, I would think. I guess what holds me back with Michigan is I can see them consistently winning, say, 9, 10, 11 games or more. But they have not looked good in the playoffs. I don't know how else to say it. They just have laid an egg this year and last year in the playoffs. And last year, Georgia just dominated them from start to finish. I wasn't even as close as the final 34-11 score. I think they got their only touchdown in the fourth quarter against Georgia's third-string defense. And then they just imploded against TCU. I mean, McCarthy throws for 2 pick sixes. They had a whole bunch of other mistakes. Not taking anything away from TCU. TCU played hard, and they played better. But it's like Michigan looked so good and so dominant during the regular season, and they have just face-planted both years in the playoffs. Now, to be fair, that doesn't mean they can't come back next year and maybe win the semifinal round and go to the national championship. Because, Georgia struggled its first time, in the playoffs. So it's possible. I don't know. I think they're probably one of the better Big Ten teams, obviously. They'll probably be the favorite to win the Big Ten again next year. And I think they'll probably make the playoffs. But would I see them as a legitimate threat against a Georgia or, another top program in the playoffs? I'm not convinced that Joel's got over that hump yet. They just, for whatever, and when they get the playoffs, they just have face planted 2 years in a row. So I think the verdict is still out.
Tom saying we all have as many bowl wins as Jim Harbaugh. That's a bit of a low shot there. Bijan is like Saquon Barkley. Corum I see as Jonathan Taylor. Pick your desire. I can definitely see that comparison. But Garth, I'll throw this to you. I want to ask you about JJ McCarthy here because you and I have had this conversation about him in the past. I think he's a very talented quarterback, pretty accurate quarterback. Obviously, athletic as well. I definitely think he's taken that Michigan offense to a new level than what Cade McNamara was doing, because no disrespect to him, I think he was a solid quarterback, but he's not nearly as talented as JJ is. But what I've always said about McCarthy, do I look at him and see him on the same level as, these quarterbacks can carry a team to a title game? Guys like Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. I don't see him as quite that guy. I think he is the beneficiary. First of all, they have a phenomenal O-line. I know it didn't look like that against TCU. They imploded. But, they've won that Joe Moore Award back-to-back years. Obviously, he's got a phenomenal running back.
Both. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree.
A completely unbiased opinion there.
Yeah, totally. UJ probably. Definitely. I definitely would agree. Completely unbiasedly. But regardless. Yeah. Garth, where are you at with Michigan and McCarthy and, obviously Corum coming back? What do you think they can do the next few years? Because, yes, they've shown they can get to the college football playoff, But now they need to show they can win it, because there's one thing losing to Georgia. Georgia was a favorite. They were heavy favorites against TCU, and like Derek said, they just absolutely imploded. 2 pick sixes. I mean, multiple mistakes. They got themselves in a big deficit, and they did claw it back. Credit to them, but by then, just a little bit too late.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I'll start with Corum electing to return and foregoing the NFL draft. Absolutely huge get for this Michigan Wolverine football team. Obviously, whenever you're bringing back a guy who's basically a shoe-in Heisman candidate and a potential Heisman finalist as well, that's obviously a huge boost, regardless of what position he's at. It helps even more so when they're a key part of your offense. But, if I'm Jim Harbaugh, guys, I'm the Michigan Wolverines. I'm looking to try and figure out how can we fix this dilemma of being good in the regular season, making college football playoffs, but coming up short back-to-back years. I am aggressively attacking the wide receiver and the tight end position. This is a team that needs a legitimate passing offense very, very badly because, the past 2 years they've leaned heavily on the run, which has worked perfectly fine. Guys like Haskins, Corum. But if you notice, this is a team, especially come playoffs, that is very, very one-dimensional. And you're not going to line up against a team like Georgia or even Alabama in one of their better seasons, when they are clicking and, legitimate contenders for a national title, and just run the rock over and over and over and eat up clock and, rush for 5 or 6 yards per carry and score multiple touchdowns on the ground. It's just not reality. And the thing is too, Big Ten is a very physical conference. Me and Noah both are very big fans of that conference. But what we've seen come playoff time is when they do come up against like SEC opponents, they're kind of second fiddle in the physicality department, line of scrimmage department. So, I would like to see Michigan, if I'm, in charge, I'm Jim Harbaugh, attack wide receiver, whether it's in the transfer portal, recruit some guys. They've got to figure out getting a legitimate passing attack so that they are not just so one-dimensional on offense, because I think that the run game's been great. The defense, yes, it would, melted down against TCU, but the defense really hasn't been too much of an issue for them. They just got to be able to do more than just run the ball. And also, unfortunately, injuries is part of the game. Corum went down at the end of the season. You can't just bank on one guy being the workhorse and carrying the offense all season long.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the thing with Michigan, like you said, is, when defense coordinators are coming in to game plan against them, it's all about stopping the run. It's all about containing Corum, containing Edwards. And I do like some of their, skills positions. I really like Ronnie Bell at receiver. I think Luke Schoonmaker is a good tight end, but, no defense coordinators going in that meeting and says, man, we got to stop this Michigan passing attack. It's just kind of, efficient. It gets the job done when it needs to. But, like Garth says, if their running game does falter, can they overcome that? I don't know. I definitely agree. I think they need to get some more skills guys in there.
But like you said, no, I think the passing game for them is serviceable. But if they have to rely on the pass game to win, that's when they're in trouble.
I mean, just throwing it back to Ohio State. Why did they give Georgia the toughest game? Because they're an incredible passing team, and our secondary is weak. I always said I thought Ohio State was our toughest matchup because the other two teams are more focused on running the football, which we're obviously much better at defending. But, it is what it is. Now, moving on to the next one. And, Garth, obviously, I'm going to throw this one to you first. This was not a topic when we had this show scheduled for last week, but now I have to put it in. This whole Jalen Rashada stuff. Now, it's been all over the place. I know, if we're talking about this a day or two ago, we'd say, oh, this guy's so selfish. His parents are way too greedy, want $13 million or whatnot. But I saw something come out today that, the NIL collective at, UF said that they basically promised him that. And then later they're like, oh, you know what, never mind. We changed our mind. And then obviously he's not too happy about that. But, I'll throw this over to you first. What are your thoughts on this whole, situation that's been going down with Jaden Rashada, this NIL stuff, and, more in general, the state of NIL, because, I know you and I've had this conversation dozens of times in the past. A little summary for people who haven't heard. We support college football players, getting some pay. But because, they're quite frankly manipulated by the NCAA for years, not making any money off their likenesses. But where NIL is going, Because to me, I thought, sponsor deals after a player is committed, not this free agency bidding war that, to get recruits in, to get transfers in. I think it's getting a bit ridiculous. So, Garth, take it away here. What are your thoughts on this whole Jaden Rashada saga here?
Yeah, it's been absolutely chaotic, honestly, because I think still to a degree we're kind of in the dark with the exact details, what exactly happened, what was done entirely by both sides. We're just kind of getting like a general idea. And even a lot of people on social media, just neutral parties were like, even some of the Florida pages that are following are like, what the hell is going on? Like, somebody needs to come out, be 100% honest, and tell what exactly happened, because this whole like keeping it under wraps thing is, it's for the birds. We need to know what's going on. But before I kind of like go off on a tangent, I just wanted to talk about NIL in general real quick. Actually, something that I just found out the other day because of this situation, actually, that I don't think a lot of college football fans realize, because we still don't really know a whole lot about NIL, honestly. We just know that players are able to be paid now and make money off of their name, image, and likeness. But actually, so how it works is the coaching staff, the university, and the reason I found out about this, guys, is because a lot of Florida fans were literally calling for Billy Napier to be fired over this on social media. The university and the coaching staff have nothing to do with NIL. They don't negotiate contracts. They don't set up deals. They don't promise anything. If they do, it's actually considered tampering by the NCAA. That's why all these schools have a collective in place, because it's the coach's job to recruit these kids for the sake of playing football, education, our staff, what we're going to do for you as a player. But it's totally on the collectives that these universities have in place to negotiate contracts, set up sponsorships, promise these kids X amount of dollars, whatever. So, first and foremost, for anybody out there, if your school ever loses a player over NIL situation like this, whatever, just know that it's not on the coaching staff at all. But yeah, like I said, it's a really weird subject. First foremost, $13 million is absolutely absurd for a kid who hasn't even played a snap in college football. I think that we can agree, Noah, that, nothing against this kid in particular or any athletes going out of high school, but it's probably a good thing that he didn't get paid $13 million, because all of a sudden that creates an even bigger bidding war. And like you said, basically free agents
so great
kids. But I think ultimately what happened is, at least from what I've gathered, is that it wasn't the collective itself that promised him $13 million. They basically set him a sponsorship with whoever, like, hey, we worked out this deal with so-and-so, they're a sponsor of us, they're agreeing to pay you $13 million, and then that sponsor backed out. So, but again, like I said, I don't think all the exact details are out there. It's a really unfortunate story for both sides, because, he's now going to miss out on spring ball entirely because he cannot early enroll anywhere. He might even have to end up redshirting his freshman year now, because he's already so far beyond the 8 ball with all of this going down. So it sucks. I'm not mad. I'm not pissed off at either side here. It sucks. And hopefully they can get NIL figured out, because I don't think that a complete bidding war every offseason for college football is a good thing.
As I throw this to you, Uncle, you obviously give your thoughts on this whole Rashada thing, the state of NIL, but, I'll bring up a topic more relevant to us as UGA fans regarding A.D. Mitchell. Now, A.D. Mitchell, very talented player, was, I think definitely our best wide receiver in the playoffs, transferring to Texas. Now, I don't have any problems with this actual move. I wish him all the best. I've heard he's got a son over there or something like that. I get all that. But when I hear, stuff like the University of Texas has been in contact with Mitchell since December, I don't know, how privy you guys are with the rules, but contacting a player that's still on a roster who is not, into the transfer portal, it's a little thing known as tampering, which is obviously not very good. I don't know what Texas was doing there, but, just some general thoughts on the state of what NIL has become, because I don't think it was intended to be this kind of, bidding war for these recruits or the transfer portal.
Well, I agree, and I kind of agree with your original statement. I think it's originally was meant for, okay, you have these players that have committed to this school. After they've committed to the school, here's a way to help them out, to get them some income, since they are obviously generating so much income for the university and the coaches and everyone else. The collectives made up of alumni or boosters, whoever, they would be handling that. But as you mentioned, what it's turned into, unfortunately, is basically minor league free agency. Like, if you come play for our university, this is the sweet deal we're going to give you. And I agree. I don't think that's how it was meant to be. It wasn't meant to be a bidding war for the highest bidder. And I hope it doesn't turn into that, because it's going to be the richest schools that are going to be able to buy the best players. And my thinking with this, I don't think anyone knows all the details, but it's sort of like you sword. Meaning, if this was this young man's only motivation to go to Florida, not because of Billy Napier, not because of the history or the tradition, not because of Gainesville, if his only motivation was financially, and somebody pulls that away, well, it's not really a shock that he's probably going to go elsewhere. But I don't think that was fair to him or the university. So to me, there needs to be more incentive than just financial. And as far as A.D. Mitchell, I love A.D. Mitchell. I think when he was healthy, he was probably Georgia's most talented, gifted wide receiver. Unfortunately, he wasn't healthy for most of this season and missed most of the season, although he came on strong in the playoffs. I wasn't aware of the tampering by Texas, and if that's the case, I think that's a big no-no. I had heard, he is originally from Texas, and reportedly, if you believe, he has a young child in Texas, either a son or a daughter. And I can respect that if he's wanting to get back closer to family. I do think it's a mistake on his part, though, because if his objective is to make it into the NFL, speaking bluntly, I think he's got a better chance of being the number one wide receiver on a potential national championship team than being, a top receiver on a Texas team that might go 6-6 next year, or maybe 7-5. Jermaine Burton switched to Alabama, thinking that was going to improve his draft status. I think if you asked him that now, he'd probably realize that was a mistake. If you even remember Demetrius Robinson 2 years ago, he was potentially going to number one wideout, and then he transfers to Auburn for the same reason and was pretty much forgotten. And he was a former number one wide receiver recruit in the country. If you remember back in 2016, Demetrius Robin was the number one ranked wide receiver in all America. And originally he chose to go to Cal, then later came to Georgia. And mainly because of injuries, he just never really caught on fire at UGA. But the point being, I think I like Mitchell. I wish him nothing but the best. I think he's making a huge mistake by going to Texas in that case.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And I think for UGA, I mean, obviously I'm not going to say it's a nothing loss. He's definitely a very good player. But I will say getting in Ra Thomas and Dominic Lubbock as the transfers, I think those will be big gets as well. But just for Rashada, I just want to say this. You have to remember, these are still kids. Like, these are 17, 18-year-olds in recruiting, and they're getting these millions of dollars thrown at them. They're probably getting pressured by their parents and agents. Just quite frankly, just taking all the rules and, out of it, just on a moral level. I don't know if I'd feel comfortable with that. I think it's gotten a bit out of hand. Now, I will say, do I want to scrap NIL? No, because, like I said, I think in the past, the NCAA has, profited off these players for so long and they haven't gotten anything out of it. I do want it to stay, but, maybe some regulation or something, to try and keep it in control. I mean, thousands of players in the transfer portal as well. it's all over the place. I mean, you got a guy like, our guy JT Daniels. He's going to be in his 4th college next year when he goes to Rice. Like, that's unheard of. 10 years ago, you say that to someone, they look at you like you're from freaking Mars. Like, that's just not possible. But now it is. Some fresh 5-star freshman comes in and, he's not the starter right away. Well, you're for now. I'm going to transfer portal. I couldn't beat out anybody. I want to get a job somewhere else. Like, I don't know, man. I think it's a mess personally.
And to me, it's kind of taken some of the glimmer off recruiting, if you will. Meaning, obviously, you want your team to get the best recruits. That's without saying. Obviously, it's really exciting when Georgia has a really good recruiting class or whoever. But with the transfer portal, it's not the guarantee that it used to be that you would have all these awesome players for at least, 3 years. Because a lot of these 4 or 5 stars, they're not willing to sit on the bench for a year or two. They may commit to your school, but if they don't get a starting position, they're in the transfer portal within a year. It's very rare you're seeing players being willing to sit for 2 to 3 years. That's why, to be honest, I'll be amazed if Brock Vandagriff stays at Georgia after spring practice. I hope he does. I really do. I hope he does. I think he can be a very good quarterback. But if Carson Beck is named the starter, and I mean, I think everybody thinks he probably will be. He's the only one that's got any real game experience. Brock Vandagriff is a former number 1 rated pocket passer in high school for his class. I think it was either 2020 or 2019. He was a former Oklahoma commit under Lincoln Riley, who decommitted and signed with Georgia. I just don't see him being willing to sit on the bench for a 3rd year where he could be starting probably at most FBS schools the first day. I hope I'm wrong, though. I hope he does stay, because you never know what could happen to Carson Beck, heaven forbid. But injuries happen, things happen. But it's just the transfer portal has really affected everything, including recruiting.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, quite frankly, I thought Vandagriff would transfer last year. I'm amazed he's still here, honestly. But
I was, all the recruiting sites that I follow, guys, are all expecting basically round 2 of transfer portal frenzy after spring ball concludes, and we find out who's most likely to be a starting quarterback.
Yeah, so if you thought the first transfer portal was crazy, go stay tuned, because it's probably going to happen again. Moving on to the next topic. This is just kind of a little short topic. We kind of already talked about the Big Ten, but news came out last week that Big Ten Commissioner Kevin Warren has now officially left his post to head to the Bears to become their president and CEO. Obviously, the Bears picking number 1 in the draft, so we'll see what they do there. But I just wanted to give this little topic because the Big Ten, big news lately. I mean, they got that big TV deal coming in, USC and UCLA coming in the conference in 2024. Michigan and Ohio State looking really solid. It looks like he's actually, left the Big Ten in a really good state. I definitely, think of them as the clear-cut second best conference in college football. Obviously, I don't think they're the SEC, but I think they're way better than, the Big 12, the Pac-12, and the ACC. Because they actually have more than one team that you can say is a genuine contender. But Garth, I'll throw this to you. What are your thoughts on the Big Ten in the next few years when USC and UCLA come in, because those are big money makers as well. Where do you see the Big Ten going in the next few years?
Yeah, they definitely need to. I don't know if they've announced who's going to be the next commissioner there, but they definitely need to hire somebody who's going to do an excellent job, because the potential's there. I do believe they are the ones that are taking over that CBS TV contract as our SEC switches over to ESPN ABC, which will be really cool. Not to get off on a tangent, but I am so excited for that. I'm so sick of CBS making the best game of the week be at a noon or a 3:00 time slot every week, and getting robbed of so many good potential night games throughout the SEC season. But yeah, I think, like you said, Noah, he's left it off in a really good spot. They're going to be getting that big CBS TV contract. Obviously, USC is going to be coming in with a lot of hype around them because Lincoln Riley there, the quick turnaround that they had this year. Again, not to backtrack, but huge props to the transfer portal. We've seen how effective that can be with Lincoln Riley's USC team this year. You guys remember a few seasons ago with Mel Tucker and Michigan State, he did fantastic as well, getting guys like Kenneth Walker in there. But yeah, so USC is coming in with a lot of hype surrounding them. They're looking to be trending upwards. We'll see how it actually pans out come Big Ten football and having to play in cold weather and, that crazy amount of traveling they're going to do. I can't imagine that's going to be easy. Even a lot of NFL teams don't handle it the best. UCLA as well, by no means did they have a bad year, but they didn't quite have the season and the excitement surrounding them that USC has. But yeah, no, I would agree. I think that he's left it in a really good position, a lot of potential to grow that conference. We just got to see how they choose to do it and who they choose to lead the way.
I'll throw this one to you, Uncle. Definitely, first of all, they've just basically said geography makes no sense anymore. It doesn't matter at all making these conferences. We want all the money we can get. We're getting in these big, LA schools to come in and, the biggest moneymakers of the Pac-12, which, look, I've always said I don't even know if the Pac-12 will survive without these two teams because there's already the lowest earning Power 5 conference and they're losing two of their biggest teams. But regardless, when it comes to Big Ten, like Gar said, they got that, nice TV deal with CBS. I think there's also NBC and some other network is involved in it as well. But the SEC moving to ESPN, which I think is a great deal for that conference. But for the Big Ten, where are you at with the Big Ten? Because would you agree that they're, consistently, it seems like the past years, kind of that second best conference in college football to where they're pretty much the only conference besides the SEC that you can think, okay, there's more than one team here that has at least some shot of winning a playoff game, winning or competing for a national title? Can't hear you. Garth, can you hear him?
I can't. For me, actually, all sound cut out there for a second. I could hear you now, but
Yeah, I can't hear you. I don't know what's happening there. Maybe you should jump out and hop back in, see if it fixes it or something. Technical difficulties here on the Sweet Tea show, but anyway, Tom saying I can hear no one, Garth. Yeah, I don't know what happened there. He was working fine earlier. Hopefully, just a little minor bug. But yeah, it is what it is. We'll give him a minute or two to get back in here. But in case you guys are watching, hang on, he's right back. Let's see if it's working. All right, say something.
Yep.
There you go. Now you're coming through. Now go ahead. Big Ten.
Good deal. Big Ten, I would agree. I think in recent years, it's been really the only other conference in college football that's more than one legitimate contender each year. Michigan, Ohio State have been very solid. I threw Penn State in there. So they've had three teams that are good quality for the last, 4 or 5 years at least. But yeah, I'd put them probably close number 2 to the SEC. Something I think they should do, quite frankly, especially since they're getting USC and UCLA, and I think they should redo their divisions. Because I don't know if you've watched the Big Ten championship games. They are pretty much a snooze fest. In fact, I've read since they went to divisions, and a Big Ten West team has never won the Big Ten championship since they went to divisions. It's been the Big Ten East team every single year. So I think that would add more excitement. And quite frankly, it may help a team like Michigan in the playoffs. Because I was kind of wondering that when we were talking about them earlier. They basically face somebody like Purdue or a Wisconsin team that's beat up in the Big Ten championship, and then they get a month off before the playoffs. And I just wonder if they had a little more competition, in their conference game, would they be a little more on point come the playoffs? A thought. But I do think, especially with USC, UCLA coming in within a couple of years, I think they're going to be probably the second best conference. The Pac-12's getting some, decent-looking teams like Oregon and Washington. But with USC, UCLA leaving, I don't really see the Pac-12 bouncing back. I don't really see the Big 12, even though they're getting Cincinnati. I just don't really see them elevating to where they used to be with Oklahoma and Texas. And then, the ACC is pretty much should just be renamed the Always Clemson Conference, quite frankly. Because, it's basically Clemson and everybody else, Occasionally Pittsburgh or UNC has a respectable year. But as far as a real playoff contender, it's basically Clemson and that's it. So I think Big Ten will be competitive, but I don't think they'll overtake the SEC, in the immediate future.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I think the main thing, like you said, the real Big Ten championship game is Ohio State, Michigan. It's not the actual game. That's just cold hard truth. And look, if they did want to redo the divisions, you don't have to lose the Ohio State, Michigan game. You can just do what Georgia, Auburn do, or Georgia, Georgia Tech, make it a protected rivalry, put them in different divisions, and then you'd actually have, the two best teams in different divisions. I'd also say put USC in one division, put UCLA in the other. Don't put them in the same one. The only major concern I would have with this is how the hell is the travel going to work with two teams in LA? I don't know, but they'll definitely have to consider, what to do with that. But, definitely agree. I think Big Ten is comfortably the second best conference in college football. Will they ever overtake the SEC? I don't know. I think with the Oklahoma and Texas coming in, the SEC will be even better. They'll get more marketability with the ESPN contract. We'll see what happens. But as of right now, I think the Big Ten is pretty secure in that number 2 spot. Josh Burdick saying the grand reveal coming soon. It was right at the beginning of the show, actually, showing off that trophy. He can do it once again, though.
Josh must have missed it. But yes, Josh, I did receive my fantasy football championship trophy. And thanks to you, good sir, the commissioner of our Fired Up Fantasy Football League. So thank you for doing that for me, and it was really awesome to win it this year. Me and Noah, we mentioned, took first and I believe fourth, so 2 out of the top 4 spots, and hopefully we can do it again next year, Noah, but 1-2 this time around.
Yeah, and speaking of fired up, Lane Kiffin has to be fired up at the fact that Walker Howard, former LSU freshman quarterback, number 3 overall dual threat quarterback in 2022, number 42 overall prospect, announced he was entering the transfer portal last week, and just yesterday, I believe it was, said that he is picking Ole Miss. And today, Garth and I's favorite quarterback other than Bo Nix, Spencer Sanders from Oklahoma State, said he is transferring to Ole Miss as well. Probably the most mediocre quarterback in college football, in my opinion. It seems like every big game this guy has, he goes 10 for 30, 187 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions. But for, Garth, I'll throw this one to you because, man, what a disastrous end of year it was for Ole Miss. They lost like 5 straight games. They just looked absolutely lost towards the end when it looked like for a minute they could maybe sneak around, beat Alabama, win the SEC West. They weren't even close in the end. They just had a disastrous end of the year. Lane Kiffin did get that big contract extension that, funny enough, we talked about last time Uncle Derek was on the show. But now Walker Howard is in there. He's got to beat out Spencer Sanders. I don't know. I don't think that'll be too difficult. But, former 5-star overall quarterback going to Ole Miss. Where are you at with this Ole Miss team? Because it kind of feels like every year we're like, okay, maybe they can take that next step. Maybe they can beat Alabama again because they have done it in the past. And then in these big games, they just kind of go out and lay an egg. They're up 17-7 against Bama this year. And then they just kind of got steamrolled that second half pretty much. So where are you at with Lane Kiffin's Ole Miss team this next season?
Yeah, this one was a little bit strange. Not that not necessarily that they were able to land former 5-star recruit Walker Howard, but that shortly afterwards, literally just a few hours later, Spencer Sanders announced that he also would be transferring to Ole Miss. So you've got kind of a young, highly touted guy, because he was just out of not this year's class, but the one before, coming in, who you would think is going to have the best shot at winning the job there at Ole Miss. But then you have a guy in Spencer Sanders, like you said, Noah, neither me or you are a huge fan of his, because he seems to just, be right at that midway line where, he'll have a decent game and then the next game he'll look absolutely terrible. He's never really, he's not going out there and winning you football games. Let's put it that way. But also, too, one other thing to note, this QB room also still has Jackson Dart as well, who is another very highly touted quarterback recruit as well. So, who ends up winning this job, I don't know entirely. If I had to put a bet on it, I would like to say Walker Howard. But who knows, with Lane Kiffin, anything is possible, honestly. The only thing that kind of, I guess, shocks me a little bit is Lane is known as like this quarterback guru, offensive-minded guy. He's a little bit out there, a little bit eccentric, but usually people tend to like him. This is a offense that he's actually built to rely on the run game and win with the run game. They had one of the best rushing attacks in the SEC and the entire nation this past year, with a guy who was only a true freshman who's going to be coming back. So, it's really interesting, not only that he was able to land both of these guys in the transfer portal, because this isn't an offensive system that utilizes the quarterback. And on top of that, the fact that how loaded this quarterback room is, at least on paper, I would expect one of these three guys to be transferring out after spring ball.
You can't hear us. We can hear you. That's weird. Us. But yeah, I definitely agree. I think Jackson Dart is kind of a weird one, because I do think he's a solid quarterback, but now 2 transfers coming in. Look, I don't think Spencer Sanders will be too much of a factor. I think, like Tom says, Sanders will lose the job to Howard, but I don't really think Dart did anything wrong to lose his job. But you get a 5-star quarterback coming in.
I would have to guess that Dart is going to end up transferring out, because, at least for me personally, if I'm in his shoes trying to imagine this scenario as him as the player, what did Lane Kiffin do? He just went out and showed me that he doesn't have any faith in me being the starting guy, because not only did he just get 1 transfer quarterback, he got 2. I think
Ole Miss. I actually think they might be a decent team next year. I know they started off good. They started off 8-0, and then somehow they just kind of imploded down the stretch and lost 5 in a row. But I still think Lane Kiffin, good offensive coordinator. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Above average coach. I wouldn't say a great coach just yet. But he is an aggressive recruiter. And I could see them probably going like a 9-3, something respectable next year. Depending, once again, he supposedly is kind of a quarterback whisperer. If one of these transfers really plays out for him, it's kind of funny because everyone's knocking Georgia's schedule next year. But honestly, I think by the end of the season, there's going to be 3 or 4 ranked teams on Georgia's schedule: Tennessee, South Carolina, Ole Miss, possibly Auburn or Florida, or both. So I just say never kind of give up till the season's over. But I think there's a good chance Ole Miss will be a respectable team. Do I think they'll win the SEC West? Probably not. That's probably going to go to Bama or LSU. But I think they could be possibly the second team in the SEC West. But I think they'll have a respectable season.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think, they'll probably be that second best team in the SEC West, just a little bit behind Bama. But moving on to another team in the SEC West, we're going to talk about Mississippi State. hiring a new offense coordinator and Kevin Barbay, Garth, former App State guy, to fill the position for them, joining Zach Arnett's staff, who took over after the unfortunate passing away of Mike Leach. He served, obviously, like I said, as the OC for App State. And I just want to look up the stats, kind of think of how we'll transition this air raid system. App State was a team last year that averaged around 30 passes per game. Just kind of, they do pass it a good bit. Definitely not an air raid type system, though. But the main question I want to ask you here, and we kind of already have talked about it on Nick D's show, where do you think Mississippi State is going with their future offensive scheme? Do you think they're going to continue with the air raid like Mike Leach put in, or do you think they might go in a bit of a different direction?
I think they're definitely going to, whether or not they stick specifically with the air raid system or not, I do think that they're going to remain a pass-heavy team. One thing that we talked about with that is the fact that all of these players currently on this roster were recruited or picked out of the transfer portal to support a very pass-heavy offensive scheme. I think, with the little bit of App State football that I've watched in the recent years, like you said, no, they don't necessarily throw the ball a lot, but they do like to take a lot of deep shots. They like to kind of, hit you with those haymakers versus kind of just dink and dunk, short passes over the middle, up and down the field. So I think that the hire definitely makes sense. In the sense that they want to stay committed to the pass game. They want to be able to create, those big time plays, those high scoring chances deep down the field. But yeah, I think that the identity won't be identical, unfortunately, because, Mike Leach won't be there. Rest in peace to the legend that he is. But they're definitely going to try their best to keep with that, at least for the short term. They could always change 2, 3, 4 seasons down the road when they have time to recruit kids in for whatever system that they might want to run. But at least for the near future, I would expect them to stay with a very similar style of offense.
I think Mississippi State will stick with the air raid for probably the next year or so. I don't think they're going to give up Mike Leach's offense, even with him being gone, which is very, sad and tragic. But it is going to be interesting how they do that, because they actually lost their number one wide receiver, Ra Thomas, to UGA through the transfer portal. So he was their number one go-to guy, and he's going to be playing for Georgia next season. They did promote the defensive coordinator to head coach. I don't think he's going to throw the baby out with the bathwater as far as the offense. But it'll be interesting to see if they become more of a defensive identity. Kirby Smart is making defense hip again, where defense can actually win championships. So I'm curious, after another year or two, if they don't start moving away from the air raid and more to a traditional good defense, ground and down SEC team. I think it'll be probably a couple of years before they go into that direction.
Yeah, I think they'll definitely keep it because, as me and you, Garth, have discussed in the past, it's not just obviously all the coaches that bought them, but you have to remember pretty much every recruit on this team was recruited by Mike Leach with that air raid system in mind. They're not just going to ditch that right away just because, they have a new offense coordinator, new head coach or whatnot. So, I think I agree with Uncle Derek on this one. I think they'll keep it to start. I don't know if they'll keep it long term. What we have seen, right, Mississippi State is a respectable football team. The air raid can work in the SEC because, we've seen it, work for teams like Hawaii and Washington State or whatnot. But now we've seen it can be successful in the toughest conference in the country. So we'll see what happens there. Obviously, I'm rooting a bit for Mississippi State after, Mike Leach passing away because it is very sad. But final topic of the night. And it's pretty good because, we're having some technical difficulties tonight, unfortunately. David Shaw, former Stanford head coach who had a 96-54 overall record over the past, I want to say 10 years. He was with Stanford, was interviewing with the Denver Broncos last week. Obviously, a 3 times Pac-12 winner in 2012, 13, and 15 as head coach of the Stanford Cardinal. 4 times Pac-12 Coach of the Year. In my opinion, I've always loved David Shaw. I think he's a very respectable, good coach. Unfortunately, the past 2 years when they went 3-9 back-to-back years, just hasn't really had anything on the roster. They had a solid quarterback in Tanner McKee. I think David Bailey, their freshman defensive end, is a really promising guy, but for the most part, just not much there the past few years. They had Davis Mills, who was pretty good, but not great. Um, Ever since, that team with guys like McCaffrey left and, they just haven't really been able to do anything. But as for David Shaw, I thought this was kind of inevitable at some point. Luckily, he was able to kind of just walk away on his own terms instead of getting fired. But, I don't know. I don't think Denver will hire him. But, just real quick, Garth, kind of reflect on David Shaw and his tenure at Stanford, because he had him as a, really respectable team after, Jim Harbaugh left for the NFL.
Yeah, he's had a very good run there, in my opinion. He hasn't gone out and done anything absolutely crazy, like make CFP or anything like that. But I think that he's had a lot of respectable years, even when, the record isn't that great. It seems like they're always good, like a major upset. And actually, we have a comment here that pertains to that. Our good buddy Tom Scavetta saying, "Don't remind me about Stanford." Well, that's because just this past season, they did knock off his Notre Dame Fighting Irish. So like I said, it seems like they're always good for that one upset a year where they maybe beat somebody that they shouldn't beat. They play a lot of people tough, whether they win or lose. That's one thing I've noticed. They don't really get like absolutely blown out that often. Like you said, no, I don't think he's had as much to work with as he's had in previous, parts of his tenure back when he had guys like Christian McCaffrey. But just overall, a very respectable job there at Stanford. A team that's known for having some like really good players here and there, but never being like an absolute powerhouse of the Pac-12 conference. Definitely very deserving of this interview, whether or not he does end up getting the job. I think that Denver Broncos top priority, if I had to guess, would be Sean Payton. But if they can't land him, this by no means would be a terrible second choice. So, it'll be interesting to see. The other thing, too, and it's nothing personal against him, we never really know how college football coaches pan out in the NFL until they get there and, they start coaching at the NFL level. So who knows? He could get the job and end up being really bad, or he could get the job and surprise a lot of people and do really well there. We'll just have to wait and see. But overall, like I said, a really respectable job there in his tenure at Stanford.
Tom saying, "I'm hearing Dan Quinn is choice number 2 for them." 2 thumbs down to that. That guy was actually.
Please hire him.
I know you would, but yeah, it's just no. I do not like Dan Quinn.
I like David Shaw. I think he's a very good coach. I think he was a very respectable coach at Stanford for many years. Stanford, unfortunately, ever since McCaffrey left, is pretty much, gone downhill. But I respect David Shaw as a coach and as a human being. From everything I've read, he's a stand-up guy. I guess my only concern with him, as the head coach of the Denver Broncos, is it's very rare even the most successful college football coach has success in the NFL. Nick Saban couldn't do it. Urban Meyer couldn't do it. Lou Holtz couldn't do it. Steve Spurrier couldn't do it. We've seen some excellent college football coaches who had won national championships just bomb in the NFL. It's just a different beast. Instead of dealing with 18 to 22-year-olds, you're dealing mostly with 24 to 35-year-old multimillionaires, and it's a different game. I think he deserves a shot. If they don't have anyone else they think is more qualified. I do think he's a very intelligent man. He was a very good coach at Stanford for many years. I'm just not optimistic of any college coach jumping to the NFL. I can't remember the last time I saw that where that was successful. But that's just my, personal opinion.
Yeah, I think he summed up what I was trying to say. Noah, much better. He hit the nail on the head there with that one.
Yeah, no, I don't think like you said, Garth. I think they really want to go after Sean Payton and try and help Russell Wilson. But as for David Shaw, really respectable head coach, like him a lot. Shame it didn't work out at Stanford the past few years. We'll see what happens to Stanford next few years because it's been a bit of a rut for him. But regardless, that is the last topic we had prepared for tonight's show. We are going to take at least a few weeks off. Garth and I decided on that earlier today. We'll see when we come back. We'll keep you guys posted, obviously, for when we come back. We'll let everyone know. But until then, this has been another episode of the Sweet Tea Show on the Sports Box. You guys were killing it tonight with your reactions and the comments. But real quick here, just want to do a bit of an outro. So we'll start with Uncle Derek, if he has any last words. Oh, there's this kitty. Good old Mustache is her name.
I was trying to get Fred the cat in there for a cameo. He's a good boy.
Yep. But, I guess that's going to do it. We don't really have anything else scheduled. So, from myself, Noah Dog Diber, my co-host and good buddy, Garth Charger Patrick, and my uncle, Derek, Dr.
This has
College.
been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it, guys. A lot of fun. I think a good talk. Let's do it again real soon. Go Dogs.
Yes, sir. Go Dogs indeed. Hopefully less technical difficulties next time. We'll see what happens. But regardless, this has been another episode of the Sweet Tea Show on the Sports Box. We'll be back. We'll let you know. But until then, from myself, Noah Dog Diber, my co-host and good buddy, Garth Charger Patrick, and Derek College Football, Dr. College Football Diber, we'll see you next time. Until then, respect the 2 times defending national champions, and we'll see you next time. Have a good one.
Thank you for watching this episode of Sweet Tea on the Sports Box. Please remember to follow us on all of our social media outlets. On Facebook at Sportsbox Show, Twitter at Sportsbox Show, Instagram at The Sportsbox Show. Find us on YouTube and join Outside the Box, our Facebook sports discussion group. The Sports Box is brought to you by our sponsor, Showcase Sports in Hamilton. Showcase Sports for the elite athlete. And also our friends over at CrowdPlay. Download the free CrowdPlay app today and use promo code THEBOX at sign up for 10 free points. Thank you for joining us.